Alright guys, today we have been challenged. Huawei reckons they built one of the best budget smartphone cameras in the world, which is not a small claim by any means, and they've created a bit of a challenge. They said, Mr. Who's the Boss, take this phone out into the great outdoors and let's see the best photos you can capture with it. And as you probably guessed by the title of this video, challenge accepted. Let's go. Alright, just before we start shooting photos with it though, it's worth noting the Huawei P Smart has a pretty unusual camera arrangement. It combines a 13 and a 2 megapixel rear camera. It's also got a single flash and supports autofocus. We'll get to low light too, because what it can do there is really neat. But first things first, what about plain daylight? So as you can tell, I've used an app to do a bit of color tweaking. So with every single photo I show you in this video, you'll be able to see not only what the phone can capture straight out the bag, but also what it is possible to achieve. This photo is a pretty good demonstration of the phone's shutter speed. With a good amount of light, it was able to capture the moving tram with very minimal blur. Also, taking a look at just walking people in town centre, they almost look like static frames, as if they were posing for it. So providing this light, shutter time is fast enough to pretty much eliminate blur. The detail's good too. With these fairly basic, simple shots in broad daylight, you'd have to zoom in pretty far to be able to detect any sort of anomalies. And even on the stock photos, the ones taken straight out of the phone, whilst I would say the saturation isn't quite there, the contrast definitely is. I'd be pretty happy taking one of these photos, putting a color filter on it, and throwing it straight on Instagram. Now, Huawei is a company that really likes consumers to have fun with the camera, to explore the different possibilities, so pretty much any Huawei phone you buy off the shelf is going to come with quite a few filters to play around with, and this one's no different. So you simply pull up the menu on the side, and you've got about 9 different ones to choose from, and these have been quite carefully selected. I don't think everyone is going to like all of them, but there were 2 or 3 that I kept coming back to, and they seem to work really well in just a simple town setting. So if you're the kind of person who doesn't like fiddling around with photos in third-party apps after you've taken them, but at the same time you want to take interesting, moody photos that sort of capture a place's identity a little bit, then you can still do that through these. Now you might be wondering, because the phone does have a dual camera, can it also do portrait mode? The answer is yes and no. Whilst there is an option for portraits, because of how the secondary sensor here has only a 2 megapixel resolution, and this is what is used for edge detection, the end image isn't quite as convincing as if we would have had a 13 megapixel secondary sensor, and the foreground isn't quite as well defined from the background. But it's easy to forget, this is a phone that costs just over £200. It is competing against phones like the Samsung Galaxy A3 and other devices at this price which don't even have a dual camera, so they don't offer this option. A lot of the time when taking shots of people, because of how using the portrait mode means you lose detail, it means it sometimes blows out the whites in the background, we often just resorted to taking straight up standard photos without any background blur. But when you do this, they actually turn out really well. There's a high level of detail, you could pretty much see each individual beard hair. While we were out, another one of the phone's features that seemed worth trying was time-lapse. And to say one thing, this is going to require stabilization. But if you have a tripod you can use with your phone, then without any real skill, you can create an instant cinematic memory. Personally, I prefer taking standard photos, but I think it's good that Huawei offers people the option to try other things, whether or not they use them. I think more manufacturers should really get on this. Macro or up-close photography is one of the P Smart's strong points. It is able to focus on objects that aren't very far away from it at all, and it creates a nice level of blur separating it from the background, even without using portrait mode. But I guess the most interesting thing to talk about with the Huawei P Smart is what it can do in low light. Now, it's pretty common knowledge that no smartphone in the world can shoot anything recognizable when there's no light, but the P Smart does a decent job even when you provide only a little bit. To avoid noise in the photo, it brings down the exposure of the entire image, which has got to be done, and I think it's better than the alternative of just grain and noise all over the place. But it gets better because something I really enjoyed using was what Huawei calls light painting. This is the ability for the phone to track what you're doing with either a candle or a phone's torch or some sort of small bright object, and you can effectively graffiti in the air. Or you could set this up at a traffic light and watch as cars zoom past, and it does a pretty effective job at only capturing the lights. So as you can see, whilst I'm standing in front of the phone's camera, you can't actually see me on the phone. And again, this will work much better with stabilization, but if you have that, the results are really stunning. Considering this is a lighting condition in which even my $2,000 Lumix GH5 camera is struggling, it captures a pretty clean picture. So that is the Huawei P Smart, and as of now it's available across just about every UK network. Alright guys, if you haven't already seen our unboxing of the Huawei P Smart, I'm going to leave that as a card above. And as always, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, it would mean a lot to me if you could smash that subscribe button. This video, like a lot of the ones we've been doing recently, is a little bit experimental, a little bit different, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. With that being said, my name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'm signing out.